The Ottoman military of the Ottoman classical period began effectively with Mehmet II. Though the building blocks were laid earlier with his forefathers, it was he who turned it into one of the most feared militaries of the modern world. Indeed, it was not indestructible. It achieved great victories, but also suffered terrible defeats. It did imitate European models and experiences, but managed to produce an original concepts and practices that were in turn imitated by the Europeans. The Ottoman military overall was an effective force, relative to its principal opponents of the classical period, and proved capable of providing a viable military capability in support of the political objectives of the Ottoman state. A common idea is that the Ottomans' main strength was its numerical superiority, though in reality it was severely overstated by many historical accounts. The army of Mehmet II's reign is instrumental in understanding how a victorious army operated with serious shortcomings. The army of the conqueror of Constantinople suffered severe setbacks in all 5 of the large siege operations that it undertook. Firstly, the siege of Belgrade in 1456 was a literal disaster. It started off with disparagement from home, as the Turkic elements disapproved the converted slave hierarchy that had been cemented in the Ottoman court by the ever so secluded Sultan, who separated himself from the world in his new palace in Topkapı. The siege was a total failure because the besieging army did not manage to blockade the fortress effectively, and the Ottoman Danube flotilla suffered a humiliating defeat. The staunch enemy of the Ottomans, Hunyadi, relieved the city in the nick of time. Mehmet and his army threw off these setbacks and continued the operation even more stubbornly. When the Ottoman cannons and mining succeeded in destroying outer walls, Ottoman units poured into the city. However, they were ambushed and decimated. Effective Hungarian counterattacks not only forced the Ottomans to give up, but nearly wiped out the Ottoman headquarters. Even the Sultan himself was wounded in this attack. The severely beaten Ottoman army withdrew, but remained in good order. Sultan Mehmet, who came in front of Belgrade from the southeast, started the artillery barrage on July 4th. The cannons destroyed the walls, destroyed the bastions, and played a major role in capturing the watchtowers. From the other side of the Danube, the opposing army of the 60,000 was approaching. The troops were led by John Hunyadi and Capistrano, known for his fiery sermons. Just at this time, an argument took place in the Ottoman headquarters. According to the rumor, Karaca Pasha said to Fatih, "My stately Sultan, let me go to the other side of the Danube waters. Let me stand in front of the fortress," he said. And the Rumelian lords opposed this statement and convinced the Sultan. If the rumor is true, a strategic mistake was made by not choosing this decision. If the accurate view of Uncle Karaca Pasha had been kept, the castle would have been better protected and the aid forces would not have been able to enter the castle. On the 14th of July, a 5-hour battle took place between the Ottoman navy and the alliance forces consisting of 200 ships. The Crusaders who won the battle were able to enter Belgrade. The insurgents got stronger with the help that came, and the success of Hunyadi and the continuous transfer of troops to the fortress changed the course of the war. Before Mehmet gave the order to attack on the 21st of July, Hunyadi had brought 4,000 people inside the castle. Although this number is given as 30,000, according to some sources, we see that this is not possible. When the order of attack was given, the Ottoman troops crossed the ditch and entered the city through the hole that was opened by the cannon barrages. When the soldiers thought they had won the war and made the mistake of plundering the area, they were attacked by the Crusaders and ambushed. All the soldiers who remained inside the fort were killed. The soldiers on the other side of the Danube also attacked the Ottoman soldiers. As a result of Hunyadi's successful attack, the enemy soldiers came close to the headquarters of the Sultan. In the meantime, though the vizier suggested to withdraw, Fatih did not, saying to turn away from the enemy is a sign of weakness. In fact, the strength that Fatih displayed here is worth telling. Fatih was enthused and shouted to the battery Janissary Agha Hassan, who was next to him. Upon this, Allah lost his life by walking on the enemy alone. According to the witnesses of the situation, Fatih started to bleed by biting his lips, and then Fatih rode on the enemy. It is said that during this turmoil, Fatih killed 3 people and was even wounded in the hip. Some say this attitude of Fatih saved the military from a decisive defeat. The retreating soldiers turned and began to fight, but now, seeing the impossibility of taking the castle, Fatih turned to retreat as well. The possibility of a Crusader army coming and the losses were affecting this decision. That's why on the night of the attack, the withdrawal was negotiated. It is said the Sultan withdrew without leaving a trace behind. The Ottoman losses were high. It is also said that the Sultan withdrew without leaving a trace behind him. The Ottoman losses were high. The number 24,000 is given unanimously in Western sources. The Ottoman sources state that this was less. They had left their weapons and cannons there. Fatih, who made great preparations for the siege of Belgrade, was defeated and had to withdraw. There was no obstacle for the conquest of Belgrade, but the inability to prevent the aid entering the castle changed the fate of the war. This war, which is not described in detail in Ottoman sources, has been published many times over again in Western sources. The victory of the against the Ottomans had a great impact on the West. After this disastrous defeat, the Hungarians defended Jace successfully in 1464. The 2 famous fortresses of Albania, Croia, Alacahisar in Turkish, and Shkodër, withstood 3 sieges in 1466, 1467, and 1477, and 2 in 1474 and 1478. These long and costly sieges respectively, and suffered after long negotiations. Similarly, the main fortress of Rhodes did not give up against the mighty of Mesut Pasha in 1480. Contemporary and modern explanations for why the Ottomans failed do not satisfactorily account for their problems, and sometimes hinge on the notion that they did not achieve immense numerical superiority. The real problem was Mehmed II himself, who was overambitious and paid scant attention to the limitations of the army that he had radically transformed. His character that led him to achieve his singular goal did not allow him to see past his desires and strict expectations. Mehmed's army desperately needed time to accommodate all these changes and to deal with the antagonism of the old military classes. Discussed in the video about Mehmed's reforms, we go into greater detail on Mehmed's reforms that he made in a period. Continuing, however, the army conducted nearly continuous campaigns on all fronts every year, without any opportunity for rest and reorganization. Before the disastrous defeat at Belgrade in 1456, 2 years prior, the Ottomans had taken both the gold mines of Novo Brdo, and the entirety of the south of Serbia, took the fortress of Berat in 1455. Even though its numerical strength seemed enormous, in reality, it was overstretched and even often exhausted. At the same time, Mehmed often disregarded the technological shortcomings of the earlier Ottoman cannons, which were immobile, slow, faulty, and difficult to aim. Against all these shortcomings, Mehmed's army functioned better than any of its counterparts, which can be seen by its massive military record. Mehmed's besiegers successfully built furnaces and cast various types of cannons in front of the fortress in the most of the above sieges. In most cases, the army properly constructed lines of circumvallation and contravallation, and employed effective masking forces. Mehmed's miners showed remarkable talent, performance, and zeal, and actually set a new standard that was followed by European countries. However, in some cases, simple shortcomings were enough to change the tide and give the opposing forces what they needed to win, as in the example of the failure of the Ottoman Danube flotilla in Belgrade, or natural obstacles that were so great to overcome in a short time, or even the man-made fortifications that needed time to break open. Mehmed's overconfidence and sometimes inability to understand the limits of his army was the common problem in all these battles. It was he who would push his men to the brink of defeat, and sometimes they would be defeated. the limitations of the well-trained and well-equipped and highly motivated Ottoman army became even more evident during the conquest of Albania in 1456 to 1478 against primitive but capable warrior tribes, which made effective use of the rugged mountainous terrain. Here, the Ottoman trained warrior and hero Skanderbeg, or George Castrioti, displayed outstanding conventional combat leadership and defeated a series of Ottoman expeditions, arguably with its considerable assistance from foreigners, including Venetians and the papacy. Indeed, some of the most vicious combat actions of the entire classical period took place in Albania. The Ottoman army managed to hold its ground and, against the odds, increased its control over Albania while simultaneously conducting other campaigns. Typically, the ever-pragmatic government managed to enlist the increasing number of Albanian nobles and made use of their military potential as they did with the Serbs, the Byzantines, and whoever was willing to join them. In the end, a mixture of conventional large unit and mission-oriented small unit operations pacified the entire region. A second rebellion again created a problem in 1481, but Ottoman provincial units managed to suppress it, albeit with the help of the central government, in 7 years. But overall, Mehmet's army had done what no one was thought possible. The Ottomans under Mehmet took the greatest city to ever exist, ended the lines of 2 emperors, absorbed Morea, ended the empire of Trebizond, and Wallachia became a vassal. Bosnia and her king fell. It humbled the powerful Venice. It took her colonies, recovered Ottoman rule over the eastern Turkic tribes and beyliks, turned the valleys of Moldova white with the bones of her men. Albania fell with her heroes, and her hills flew Ottoman flags. The Khans of Crimea bowed to Mehmet and even struck into the mainland of Italy itself. In the next part, we'll look at the armies of Bayezid II and Selim I, who cast his powerful shadow east to take upon the once lieges of the Ottomans, the Mamluks.